Welcome to the home of the DIY movement, where we build stuff and paint things.
All right, y'all, welcome back. It's Way Back Wednesday, man. Where we last left off was how not to do body work on a car, but it turned out okay. So now that the metal patch panels are in, we're ready to move on to the body work and paint job, which is the very first paint job that I've ever done. So, man, where do I start? The first paint job I did, the first time I ever attempted to even start thinking about a paint job, I didn't know the first thing. I didn't know where to start, period. I remember the guy was on the way, Joe was on the way down here. I remember this is crazy. I remember I sent him a text message, and because I was ready, man, I was like hyped up. I'm like, hell yeah, man, finna paint a car. And I said, well, I wanted to make sure that everything was in place and everything was set so we can get right to it, right? And I was like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, what should I start? And he was like, well, start blocking. And I didn't even know what that meant, which is laughable now. I don't know if he said that as a joke, because it's so labor intensive, and it's not fun, people dread it, or I don't know. But he just said, well, start blocking. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And he was like, well, sand the car. And I was like, well, what grit? And then I think he said, like, well, just wait for me to get there. So looking at the foundation here, man, there's a whole lot going on, man. Like, now in hindsight, I mean, I'm not a professional, you know what I mean? But I've painted, 10 or more cars or whatever. But looking at this picture right here, there's just a lot going on, man. There's a lot of feathering around the trim, where the trim goes. We got bare metal. We got filler on top of bare metal. We got primer on the roof. We got old paint. I think this car had like 3 paint jobs before, so this was going to be 4. Some areas were taken down, so they had to be feathered out, the whole way, because you can feel it. And it, man, looking at this picture right here just kind of takes me back, because I had no idea what I was doing. I remember, if you guys have been watching YouTube for a while, there used to be a guy, I think he's still active, but not as active as he used to be. It used to be called Learn Auto Body and Paint, and he had a website, learnautobodyandpaint.com, where you could purchase like an online book of how to paint a car. And I bought that, purchased it, I downloaded it, I printed it, and that was kind of how the whole thing started, man. I was like, like, looking back, I really didn't even know what I was reading. I just knew that this car was going to get painted, at all costs, right? So, man, we didn't even use epoxy. And I remember Skim, I doubt Skim watches, but maybe he's watching, Tony, up in Crum, Texas. I posted pictures, I think on Lay It Low or something, it had to be Lay It Low, and of the car painted or in the paint process, and he asked a question. You guys didn't use any sealer? And I didn't even know what that was. And now looking back, no, we didn't. And I told him that. But some jobs you need sealer, some jobs you don't. But by the time this thing was like sanded and ready for paint, which we're going to get to in a few pictures here, it from what I know now, my experience now, it wasn't ready for paint. Here's another picture of the door, that's passenger door. We were wet sanding or whatever, in preparation for paint. We were at the final stage, And you know, man, you spray water on that thing and it looks wet, man, and you're like, shh, man, that looks great, you know, like that's ready for paint, you know. I mean, look at it. And you know, that's a tactic. You know, it might ruffle some feathers, but that's a tactic that, you know, a lot of these car flippers do, man. If you notice, when they're trying to sell a car, man, all they do is spray it down with a water hose and make it look wet, and it looks a lot better than it actually is. And that, you know, should be outlawed, because that's fraud. It's a false representation of the actual car. But anyways, that's you know, irrelevant. But looking at this picture, you know, I think that the door was probably sanded with probably 320, and sprayed it down. I'm like, shit, man, we're seeing glass paint right there. You know, here's a picture of the hood. I would say the hood is ready for paint at that stage right here. Trunk as well. You know, there's not a whole lot of breakthrough. The reflection's looking flat. The trunk and the hood were good. It's just the areas that we repaired. You know, I mean, they were good at the time. They were ready for paint at the time. But, you know, looking, you know, compared to what I know, you know, almost 15 years later, I know better. I know more, you know, so I do better. Know better, so you do better. And it wasn't ready for paint. You know, looking at this car, and, you know, we were going back, you know, black on this car. So now what I like to see is a completely uniform panel with no breakthroughs before paint, especially going black. And here we have some breakthrough on the quarter there. We broke down the filler, and then a little bit of breakthrough on the door, but that's not bad. But mainly that filler area right there on the quarter panel, you know, that's not ready for paint. And we painted right over that. I want to say that's probably why Skim said, man, you guys didn't use any sealer. No, we went straight to base coat, man, over 320. And I mean, the end result, you know, it all worked out. I don't know the longevity of it. The car's been way long gone, and it's traded hands a few times. Who knows where it's at now? But I remember, you know, I didn't realize how, at this point, how much work it took, or it takes, to get a car in primer, you know, after metal work, after filler work, to get just to the primer stage. And I remember I had a conversation with Joe when we were done on the back porch, and that's what I told him. I said, man, I didn't realize the amount of work it takes to get to primer. You know, most people who don't do this think primer is you just spray primer on it and it's ready for paint. You know, it's like, you know, like you buy house paint and it's like primer and paint in one. And I guess people have the misconception that that's how automotive paint and body works, and it's far from that. So I remember telling Joe, I was like, man, I didn't realize how important the primer stage is, you know, or the bodywork stage is, or all the stages, you know. I mean, going back to buying the car, you know, starting there, you know, it's didn't realize what I was getting into, man, but I was learning as I went. I was being a sponge, soaking up all the information I can get from Joe, and you know, just soaking it up, man, and learning and you know, taking notes and mental notes of what to do, what not to do, and just the whole process, man. We just dove right off in it. You know, here's another picture, I believe, after we were done wet sanding, pushed it out in the sun to let it cure, and looking at that top quarter panel, that's not ready for paint. There's too much action going on there. You got some high spots, some low spots. That's black paint under that primer, so I think we primered this car like one time, high build. And you know, that you shouldn't paint over that, man. That should have been sealed, or maybe reprimed and blocked again in something like 600, and maybe you wouldn't have those breakthroughs. Maybe the primer would build up, you know, just enough to level that out. But nonetheless, man, I was on a mission. We were on a mission, and we're gonna paint this thing, right? You know, looking at this picture right here, man, we must have wheeled it back in and re-guide coated it, and maybe went 600. I really don't remember, but that's what's happening in the picture. is it was re-guide coated and sanded again, I guess. And we got the dash masked off because we didn't paint the dash. It was already pretty nice. It was red, so we got the dash masked off, and I believe we had already set it on the new frame at this point. You know, here's some pictures of the frame, the wrap frame that we set it on. And I guess looking, you know, I guess we did paint it on that frame, you know, so we're making sure the skirts fit, and we set it down, and now that thing is squatting and it's looking proper, right? And I'm getting excited. I'm like, hey man, hell yeah, this is the look I was going for right here. You know, the back end on the ground, the roof open, and you know, at the time those Roadstars, you know, which you guys follow the channel, man, I'm a big fan of the Roadstars, so had some Roadstars on it, and man, you couldn't tell me shit. Like, the lift is putting in work. You know, my measurements that I took for the, you know, to make sure it fits an X frame, that came out perfect. And man, it's becoming a reality. Like the whole idea of building a frame off car is finally becoming a reality in this picture right here. You know, it's like it's on a wrap frame in my shop with my lift, and I'm getting ready to paint it. It's crazy to look back and actually, you know, see that, you know. So here I remember Joe saying, you know, we should paint some small stuff first, you know, like get our feet wet a little bit, you know, and get a feel for the materials, get a feel for the gun and how things are going to act, you know, before we dive off into the actual car, man. So we painted these small pieces: the cowls, the skirt, valance, and interior headliner moldings. And you know, I mean, it was base coat, clear coat. It was shop line black base and shop line clear. The cheapest line, I forgot what the model or the line number is, but it was the cheapest stuff. And he actually came back on the next day, on Sunday, because he wanted to see it. So we painted this stuff on Saturday, and he came back on Sunday, and I had already, you know, been out, you know, came out to the shop, you know, see it, you know, the next day cured, and, you know, pick up the parts and, like, you know, touch them and look at them and all that. So I had already looked at the stuff, and he walked in, and he was like, well, what do you think, man? How's it look? And I was like, man, it fucking looks great, you know. And he looked at it, and he's looking at the skirts, and he was like, man, well, this is got a lot of trash in it, you know, it's gonna need to be buffed. And I was like, man, I don't even know what that means, you know what I mean, or how do we do that, you know? And he was like, well, you know, we'll get to it. But he's like, yeah, this needs, we could fix, you know, all these little things. He started showing me all the little nibs and lint and stuff that landed, you know, on the panels. And, you know, if you don't have an eye for that, then you really don't look at that. You're just looking at the gloss, you know, the shiny stuff is what I always say. And at that point, you know, is when I started developing the eye for seeing past the shiny stuff and looking at the problem issues, which is, you know, nibs, dust, lint, dirt, pollen, you know, whatever comes into play when you're not painting, you know, in a paint booth. This was probably the next weekend, and the stage is set, right? The stage is set for paint. I did like way overkill of trying to create my own, you know, paint booth with the plastic sheeting. Way overkill, man. But at the time, I wanted the place to be as clean as possible, because that's what he emphasized. Clean. He was like, man, shut the door for the shop. Don't open it for the whole week. Let the dust settle. You know, if you open it, the pollen's going to come in and it's going to be floating around. You know, don't blow the car off because it's going to float around. He's like, man, close the shop. If you want to put the plastic up, you know, do that with the door closed. And that's what I did. And, you know, looking back, it's way overkill, because basically if you're painting in a garage or in a shop or anywhere that's not a booth, outside, for example, you're going to get lint, you're going to get trash no matter what, and you're going to need to wet sand and buff. So if you're going to have to do that already, then going through the extra 6 hours of work to drape everything in plastic is worthless, because you're still going to get the imperfections in the paint. So you're still going to have to wet sand and buff. So there's no point in doing all that. Now what I do is I just keep the door closed and, you know, and hope for the best. And, you know, like I say, everything gets wet sand and buff. So the end result still looks great. It's just, if you don't know better, you know, then you're going to waste a lot of time trying to build a booth, trying to use your $20 box fans that you got from Walmart. You're going to chain them all up and put 5 of them to try and evacuate the overspray. You know, it's just, you're kind of working against yourself. You know, here's the money shot right here, man. I don't even remember who took this picture, but that's me on the left and that's Joe on the right. He's mixing the paint and I'm sitting there, you know, standing there like ready, man, you know. And that was a DeVilbiss starting line little kit. I think it came with 3 guns. It came with like a primer gun, a base gun, and a clear gun, or a primer gun, a base and clear gun, and a little mini detail gun. And I think it was like $200 at the time, or like $180 or something. 3 gun kit. Now it's probably like double. And I mean, I painted the car with it, and but you know, they're exactly as advertised, man. Starting line, beginner, super beginner quality of a spray gun. But anyways, you know, he's mixing up the base, and I remember even with this car and the next one in the Way Back Wednesdays, you know, I didn't know how to adjust the paint gun, so I would pass it to him, tell him to adjust it, and he would, and then I would grab it from him and I start painting. And you know, looking back at how many times I did that, you know, that doesn't make any sense to do that. Why would you have someone else adjust the paint gun to the way you spray the paint? So finally I worked up, you know, finally I got over that, and I worked up, I guess, the confidence to adjust the gun. And you know, now I adjust it, you know, pretty much with my eyes closed. But you know, I do remember passing him the gun a lot and asking him to, hey man, can you set this up for me? You know, because I don't know what these knobs do. All I know is pull the trigger and paint comes out. You know, that's me right there. That's probably like the second coat of black base. That'd be the second coat right there, man. Starting at the fender. You know, I'm holding the hose, and you know, looking back, that's a terrible hose to have, because it stiffens up and it flips up. And you know, now I use the green hoses. I can't think of the name. Can't think of the name off the top of my head, but those Flexzilla. I believe Flexzilla. And so those hoses lay down. They don't whip up. This one right here gets stiff, whip up, hit the side of the car. Didn't happen at that point because it was still new. But that's me spraying the paint, man, on the first paint job. Had no idea what I was doing. I was just doing it, like, kind of like treating it like you would spray paint something, you know, just put it on until it looks good. You know, here we are, the car's base coat, black. You know, that was probably at least 3 coats. It might have been 4 with that shop line trying to cover up that body filler. But hey man, it's black, you know, shit, it's uniform compared to what it was, you know, a few weeks prior. We did hang the trunk and the hood to help reduce trash, but I remember those plastic sheetings kind of being in the way, man, kind of too close, you know. But hey man, it's black paint, and so it's just totally coming to life now. You know, here we are now. It's time for clear, right? Which, what can go wrong whenever you clear coat a car? You know what I mean? So it sprays differently from base coat, that's for sure. And man, there was so many blemishes or runs and sags looking back, man. But it wasn't anything that could have been, you know, couldn't be fixed. And you know, here's a good picture right here that, you know, shows it. And you know, looking at this picture right here, man, it's not terrible. You know, I would rate this finish like a 7 out of 10 out the gun. You can see the texture. orange peel, whatever you want to call it. Still, you know, it's got gloss. It's not terrible. It was the first paint job. And, you know, I got runs, which I tried to, you know, we're going to get into that in the next video. But I got runs. I got sags. I had some spots that I missed. And, you know, it was just quite a learning experience, man. But at the time, you couldn't tell me anything because, man, it came to life, man. Like I painted the car, my first car, and I had no idea what that would, you know, trigger, which it's been, you know, car after car after car every year for the last 15 years now, almost 15, that we've been building these cars on the, you know, on the channel for the last, you know, I don't know, it's been about 7 years. But this was the first one, man. The first one, that's how it started. And that was the finish out the gun. You guys are going to have to stay tuned for the next Way Back Wednesday, which is going to be, you know, the wet sand and polish and assembly, and see what can go wrong in that process, man. Hope you guys enjoyed this Way Back Wednesday. You know, go ahead and leave a comment what you think about it, man. We're trying to cover all bases on this build here, man. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Y'all stay tuned for more work, and thanks for watching.